Hey guys, what's up? It's Will coming at you with a deck profile for Buddy Fight, and as you can see, we are doing Drago Phantom Thieves, aka Persona deck. And so let's just get right into it. So obviously, our buddy is Lebla Maurice, just because of its ability to make all spells your opponents cast into treasures instead of going to the drop zone. Now that does ignore set spells and stuff like that. There are a few examples, but there are ways to kind of get around that as well. So let's just get right into the deck. So first up, 4 copies of Harry. He's your boss card, the card that kind of makes the deck work as it does, because he has a counter where you act, pay gauge, and then you can draw a card, and then you check top 4 of your opponent's deck to add 2 of them into treasure. So each turn on both yours and the opponent's turn, you're drawing a card and milling them 2 cards essentially. And then, so that's really helpful, really cool for the deck. Next up, we have 4 copies of Phantom Maria Ludman. She's your resource card, kind of like Lupus in Evil Demonic Dragons. Because she, you draw 2 cards and 2 gauge just calling her once you have the 2 treasures, which you will more times than not, just because the deck does that very easily because that's what it wants to do. So she's your resource card, but there are other cards that draw as well. Next up, we have 3 copies of Sophie Parker. Now she's you run her at 3 just because you want to see her often, but really you're calling like Phantom Maria as your other size 1, just because she does have triple attack. And with Harry, he also has double attack. But whenever you attack with her, or no, just during the attack phase, when you make a treasure, you deal 1 damage and gain a life, so it helps kind of with that burn aspect of the deck. And then you can take 2 cards from your opponent's drop zone, pay gauge, and make them as treasure. So that's also an option if you're going second, because normally they're casting a bunch of stuff. So you'll usually have at least 2 targets, if not 1. And then next up, we have 4 copies of Mon Akuin, if I'm saying that correctly. So he's here because he grabs your Harry or your item, which your item is very important just because it allows the deck to kind of aggro out because of its effects, which we'll get to in a moment. But you run him just because you want to grab your item, or you want to constantly have at least an extra copy of Harry in hand, just because he is subject to removal, because he's like an annoyance to your opponent. And then next we have the spicy tech of Lita Lorenzo. He's here as a 1-of just because you only want to see him on your turn 1. Just because if you have this in hand, you cast this, so they have 4 treasures. And then when he attacks, he becomes a size 0 if they have a treasure. But when he attacks, you can bounce him back to hand. You drop 1 of your opponent's gauge, deal them a damage, and they discard a card. So it kind of puts them at an even worse of a spot, and it's helpful. And then he comes back to your hand, so you can constantly just loop him after that. So he's best when you open him, but he's a fun of. And then next up we have 2 copies of the item, just because there are ways to search it. With this one, since if there are 4 or more magic treasures on your opponent's field. All Drago Phantom Thief monsters on your field cannot be destroyed or returned to hand by your opponent's card effects. And then if they have 6 or more, which is normally very easy, if you can't do it turn 1, at least by your next turn, 2 up to 6 treasures, all Drago Phantom Thieves on your field can attack your opponent even if they have monsters on the center. So this means they they basically have Shadow Dive, which is amazing, because if you have like this Phantom Maria, Harry, that's 6 attacks, and then this has double attack as well, so it's very easy to get more and more attacks per turn, and so it really helps you push for game. And then next up into spells, we have the obligatory 4 of Ludman. So we went over the effect of when he's in the buddy zone, it makes treasures, but when you cast him as a spell, you check top 4 of your opponent's deck, and you can put 4, you don't check them, you put 4 as treasures. So you just cast it, you mail them 4, and it's only once per turn, which is fine because there are other ways to get treasures, but this and Harry are the bread and butter of the deck. And there are ways to recur this, which we will be getting to in a moment. And then we have 4 copies of Steal Time, We Say Goodbye. It's a counter, so you can just attack. Since you can only cast it during your turn, you can do it whenever, really, since it's counter. And then basically it's your big resource card. It's basically another Phantom Maria. If you have 2 or more treasures, you gain 2 gauge. If there's 4 or more, you draw 2 cards. And 6, you gain 2 life. If 8 or more, deal 2 damage, and then it's once per turn. I always use it at least at 6, because then you're at least Dragon Emperor Legend times 2. And then the burn is just an extra spice, but you're going to be casting this once you get to a certain point. You will be casting this at least once every turn, or you'll be casting it once every turn. And speaking of the card that allows you to do that, and what kind of makes the deck fantastic and as good as it is Holy Magic. Holy Magic, you can return spells from your deck, or to your deck, so you can return 3 or more different spells from your drop zone to the deck and shuffle it. And then if you put 2, if you do, you put 2 gauge, and you gain 2 life. If you return 6 or more, draw 2 cards, and then 9 or more, deal 3 damage. So you're drawing, gaining 2 gauge, 2 life, drawing 2 cards, and then dealing 3 damage. And then with this, you're gaining 2 gauge, 2 life, drawing 2 cards, and dealing 2 damage. So that's 4 gauge, 4 life, 4 cards, and you're dealing 5 damage just on those 2 cards alone. And you're doing that at least once a turn. Once everything kind of gets situated. And then, so that's a very powerful, kind of makes the deck so, I wouldn't say oppressive, but so hard to handle, because you just get so much value. And then next we have Midnight Escape. You pay a life and you choose one of the 2 effects. You can put 1 Ludman, which is your boss spell, or 1 Drago Phantom Thief spell with set in its card name, or in it on it from your deck to hand. Or you can put up to 2 Drago Phantom Thief monsters with different card names from your drop zone to hand. So you can use it to either grab this or the set spell, which we will be talking about next, or you can grab any of your monsters to kind of help keep you going and help give you resources, or if you need that extra Harry because it was destroyed and you didn't have one, you can grab that. Anyways, it just really helps with consistency, because you can open this and just search this, and then you're good to go pretty much for the rest of the game. So very strong card, very helpful. Alright, so next up we have the set spell that you search with Midnight Escape. My Funny Venus. So obviously it's a set spell. The abilities of all Drago Phantom Thieves on your field cannot be nullified by your opponent's card effects. And when you make it a magic treasure on your opponent's field, you gain a gauge and draw a card. That's once per turn. And then you can only have one of these on the field. And that's really nice, just because, like I said, with this, you can search that or this. So if you have this, but you want the set spell, or vice versa, you can search it out to gain a gauge and draw a card just for paying a life, essentially, and you break even. So very, very good card, and plus it triggers on your opponent's turn, which just kind of helps you stay ahead of the game in that sense. After that, we have 2 copies of Night and Party. So you pay a gauge, and then it's a counter call for a Phantom Thief monster from drop by paying its call cost. And then if there's 6 or more magic treasures on the field, it gets plus 10k power and 10k defense, and then it's once per turn. So, for example, if you had a Harry and you had this already on the board, you could swing with your Harry and then swing with this. You could counter call. If you had one of these in the drop, you could call it again because you can only call it once per turn. So then you're just in response, or even like to defend yourself, you could counter call it, and then you're still like plussing on them attacking you. So it helps, just really helps maintain like your momentum. So I love it for that. Plus, when you're pushing, it helps get numbers. And then next up, we have 2 copies of Waltz for Harry. So you can only cast this during attack on your opponent's turn, which is fine because it's a nullify, the shield. You pay gauge and bounce a Phantom Thief to your hand, and then you nullify the attack. And then if there are 6 or more magic treasures, for this turn, damage you take is reduced by 3, which is very powerful because a lot of decks just have attacks with big crit. So like a lot of them go to like 4 or 5, and it's a lot easier to deal with 2 crit or even 1 crit if they're even able to swing that. And since it's not reducing the crit, it's just reducing the damage you take. It kind of avoids a lot of decks or effects, and even some impacts as well, which is what helps it. This card is Fishing Shuffle. It's your other big nullify, and I only run 2 of each of these just because it does you can recycle them with Holy Magic, so that's why you'll see me running few copies of more cards. But you can only cast it if there's a magic treasure on the field, and then you counter rest a target monster, and then if there are 6 or more magic treasures, you can rest all the opponents on your opponent's field. It kind of feels bad because there are a lot of decks that have set spells that prevent their monsters from being rested, but if they don't have it out or you're able to get rid of it, then you're good to go. So that feels really good as well. And then next up, we have an underappreciated shield, in my opinion. You can only cast it during an attack on your opponent's turn, and if you have no monsters in the center. So it's a Dragon World shield, in my opinion. But you pay a gauge, counter nullify the attack, and then for this turn, the next damage you would take is reduced to 0. So it's effectively 2 shields in 1. But sometimes they're able to ping you for 1 and then just swing at you for a big number, so that does feel bad sometimes. Next, we have 2 copies of Nice One. It's your draw spell, and it's just there for spell count, just because with all the deck draws so much already that it's more excessive than anything, but sometimes it does help you draw into those pieces when you're kind of bricking, which doesn't really happen just because of how much the deck draws. This, Tarukale, again, spell count, and then it rests 2 cards on the opponent's field. So like if they have an item or like something that they rest for an effect, you can just say no, because I'm resting it for you. and so that's helpful. And then, like I said, spell count. And then Chronos Bante RJ, if I'm saying that correctly. So you just pay a life, draw a card. That's all you're worried about. Just draw so you can get into your pieces, and then it just fuels your drop for the holy magic as well. Because at the very least, I want the draw 2, gauge 2, and heal 2, just because it makes it so powerful. Next, Sephiroth's Lecture. It's staple Magic World. Only one, just because with how much the deck draws, you don't really need to ramp or check for stuff, because you'll normally have at least one copy of everything in the deck in your hand, or you'll just have enough to keep your combos going. Next, excessive but spell count. Time Sale, draw 2 cards, and it's once per turn. You can afford to pay the cost easily every time, even on turn 1. Sometimes it's just that drawing 2 can help you get really far. So, and then, like I said, for everything else, Holy Magic. And then last but not least, we've got 2 copies of Lullaby of Steam Sky. It's the Impact. You only run 2 just because, in my opinion, with all the milling and the aggression and the burn, you're gonna be running your opponent dry of like defensive options as well. So sometimes it's just excessive and not necessary. So it's charge fodder more times than not. And you can only cast it if you attack 2 or more times this turn and have a Drago Phantom Thief on the field. And then link attacks count as well. 1, you destroy any number of magic treasures on your opponent's field and pay 2 gauge. Deal 1 damage to your opponent for each magic treasure destroyed for the cast cost. So basically, if you have like 20, which is very reasonable, you can deal 20 damage, but like I said, that's usually excessive. And if you do that and they have a card that reduces damage you take by 1, then you're just out of treasures, and then you have to kind of rebuild. So it's kind of, you gotta know when to use it. But that is it for the deck profile today. I hope you liked it. If you did, like it. If you have some comments or questions or concerns on it, leave them down below. If you want to see more deck profiles, which I will be doing more in the future, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.